The Pharaoh's code. The desert was silent except for the whisper of wind over stone, a sound older than memory itself. Beneath the blazing Egyptian sun, Dr. Amara el-Sayed's boots crunched against sand that had been untouched for centuries. The Great Pyramid of Giza rose before her like an eternal sentinel, its perfect geometry cutting the horizon with a precision that seemed unnatural. To Amara, it was not just a relic of history, it was a living puzzle, a code. Her gloves were dusty, her skin sticky with heat. Sweat traced her neck as she adjusted her scarf against the wind. Behind her, the rest of the excavation team moved quietly, their figures swathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Amara's eyes stayed fixed on the pyramid's base, where a small excavation pit had been opened weeks ago, revealing stonework unlike anything previously documented. Julian Cross, leaning against a sandstone block, scribbled notes in a worn leather journal. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the sand. His voice broke the hush of the desert. "Amara, you've been chasing this for years. What if it's nothing? A misread symbol, a dead end?" Amara tightened her jaw. "There are no accidents, Julian. Not here. Not now." She glanced past him at Nadia Hassan, a young linguist whose flashlight trembled in her hands as she crouched near the mouth of the chamber they had uncovered. The air here smelled of dust and old stone, and something older, something undefinable. Nadia's voice was a quiet whisper, almost lost beneath the sound of the wind. "It isn't hieroglyphic," she said. "It's something else. Star maps, circuit diagrams, coordinates. Not from here," Julian scoffed, brushing sand from his sleeve. "Star maps? Circuit diagrams? Sounds like a tourist's fantasy." His voice lacked conviction now. His eyes lingered on the glyphs Nadia pointed to, their surfaces glinting faintly under the beam of her flashlight. Colonel Rashid Mansour stood at the chamber's entrance, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but his posture spoke of years hardened by discipline. "Dr. el-Sayed," he said, his tone cold, clipped. "This excavation is government property. You do not have permission to go deeper." Amara did not reply. Permission, she thought bitterly, was irrelevant when the truth demanded to be found. She stepped closer to the glyphs, brushing her fingers lightly over them. They felt warm, alive, humming faintly under her touch. The chamber itself seemed to breathe. The air grew heavier. Nadia's voice became steadier as she read aloud from the symbols. "It's a sequence, a language of sound, and it's calling itself to life." Julian frowned, leaning in. "What does that even mean?" Before Nadia could answer, a vibration began beneath their feet. Low, deep, resonant. It was not sound as they knew it, but something felt deep in their bones. The glyphs glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The walls themselves seemed to shift, not in motion, but in perception, as if the stone remembered something. "The sequence." Nadia's voice trembled. "It's alive." Julian stepped back, unease creeping into his tone. "We should leave." Colonel Mansour moved toward them, his boots silent against the stone. "No, we stay. This belongs to the state, and now we know it's active. We need to understand what we found before." The words broke into silence. A sudden hush descended over the chamber, heavier than the desert heat outside. Above ground, a faint shimmer rippled through the air, subtle at first, then growing. The horizon seemed to bend, and then it began. From deep within the stone beneath the pyramid, a pulse erupted. It began as a vibration, a hum, and rose into a tone that was felt rather than heard. Nadia froze, eyes wide. "They're hearing it too," she whispered. Outside, satellites tracked an anomaly. A beam, invisible to human eyes but detected across the globe, shot upward from the pyramid's apex. Cairo shivered. Streetlights flickered. People stopped. Their eyes turned upward, uncomprehending. Inside the chamber the world changed. Shadows deepened. The glyphs shimmered brighter. shapes formed in the stone, not carvings, but living patterns that twisted and shifted. The walls no longer felt like walls. They felt like an interface, a vast, ancient mechanism humming softly beneath centuries of dust. Amara stepped back, breathing unevenly. "It's not a tomb," she said, her voice shaking. "The pyramids, they're nodes. They hold something. They hold the code for reality itself." Julian's voice was sharp. "That's impossible. You're chasing fantasies." But even as he spoke, the symbols twisted under his gaze. His breath caught. "No, it's—" The chamber was alive now. The air seemed to pulse. Light, cold and bluish, crept over the glyphs. The stone under their feet thrummed with a slow, steady beat. Colonel Mansour's voice was low and urgent. "Seal it. Whatever this is, seal it." "We are not ready." Amara shook her head, her eyes fixed on the glowing stone. "We can't. We've started it. They know we're here." Nadia looked at the glyphs again, her lips moving softly. "It's aware." Julian swallowed hard. "We should leave," but they could not. The chamber was expanding, stretching into shapes no human mind could contain. The stone dissolved into a living geometry, and they fell into darkness deeper than night itself, a place where sound was not sound, where time was not time, and where the air carried a message older than the stars. A voice, not spoken but felt, filled their minds. It was heavy, infinite. "You were designed." And the chamber pulsed again. Outside, the desert trembled. The wind fell silent. Cairo flickered like a dream. This was only the beginning. When they stepped deeper into the chamber, the air was no longer simply thick. It was alive. It pressed against their skin, filling their lungs with something that felt like sound itself. Nadia's flashlight flickered, though there was no change in the battery. Shadows writhed across the walls. Shapes moved under their vision, shapes that dissolved when looked at directly. Amara's hand hovered over the glyphs. "It's waking," she murmured. "This chamber, it's an activation point." Julian shook his head. "Activation of what? Some ancient machine?" His voice was tinged with fear now. The glow from the walls reflected in his eyes, pale green light that seemed to come from beneath the stone. Colonel Mansour stayed silent, his boots steady on the trembling floor. "This isn't an accident. We were meant to find this." His tone was calm, almost detached. But there was weight behind it, an understanding he wasn't sharing. Nadia read the sequence aloud again, her voice growing steadier despite the trembling of her hands. The language wasn't something they could translate. It was felt in the mind. The words shaped themselves into visions. The first vision came without warning, a vision of a throne room under a starlit sky. Pharaohs knelt before beings of light taller than temples. They wore shapes no human mind could contain. Their eyes were pools of shifting galaxies. The hieroglyphs danced, rearranging themselves. The stone walls became not walls but a living map, a network of energy and purpose stretching across the earth. Amara gasped. "It's not a tomb. The pyramids, they're nodes. They hold the code for reality itself." Julian's voice cracked. "Programming. This is programming." The chamber seemed to inhale. A deep vibration filled their skulls. The light pulsed, now so bright it was almost unbearable. And then the voice came. It was not spoken, it was thought. Cold, infinite, heavy. "You were designed." The words were not for one person alone, but for all of them. They echoed inside their minds, bypassing language altogether. The sensation was like the first moment of awakening, the realization that all of life was a program, and they were fragments inside it. Colonel Mansour barked orders, his voice sharp. "Seal it. This knowledge cannot be allowed to spread." Amara turned to him, eyes blazing. "No, we've already triggered it. They know we're here. This is no longer our choice." Nadia's voice was trembling now. "It's aware. It's watching us." Julian's hand clenched over his notebook. "We should leave before it's too late." But the chamber refused to let them go. The walls stretched, folding inward. The floor dissolved into patterns of light. Shapes moved in the air like living data streams. The glyphs were no longer static. They pulsed and shifted like a beating heart. The overseer spoke again, not in words but in presence, a weight in their minds. You cannot stop what has begun. Outside the pyramid, Cairo shifted. The cityscape bent in imperceptible ways. Streetlights shimmered, their light fracturing into unnatural colors. People stopped mid-step, faces blank, like glitches in a dream. Buildings twisted, walls melting into the air like wax. Time itself fractured. Inside the chamber, tension broke. Julian's skepticism collapsed into fear. We've opened something we can't close. Amara's voice was fierce. We can still break the code. End this control. Nadia shook her head. We've triggered it. There's no going back. Rashid's eyes narrowed. We have a duty to contain it, whatever it is. We can't let this spread. Their argument echoed into the living stone. The glyph pulsed again, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. The chamber beckoned them deeper, toward something they could not yet see. Amara stepped forward. This is where the truth lies. She moved toward a spiral of glyphs at the center of the chamber. Nadia and Julian followed, Rashid reluctantly behind. The air was thick, as if pulling them inward. The chamber was no longer just a room. It was a wound in reality. Shapes and voices surrounded them. Memories that weren't theirs flashed in their minds. The building of the pyramids, Pharaoh's kneeling, voices of an impossible language, the bending of the heavens. Amara reached the heart of the chamber, where the glyph pulsed with radiant power. Nadia placed her trembling hand beside hers. Julian hesitated, staring into the glow. Rashid's boots echoed heavily behind them. The glyph was not stone, it was light. It throbbed with a rhythm that resonated in their bones. A voice, not spoken but felt, filled them all. You have chosen. The air trembled. The chamber expanded again. They were falling deeper, not downwards but into infinity. Reality was shifting. Outside, the world changed forever. This was not awakening. This was a reckoning. The deeper they stepped into the heart of the chamber, the heavier the air became. It was no longer simply hot or still. It was weight itself, pressing, squeezing, compressing every breath until it felt like their lungs were filled with lead. The glyph ahead pulsed steadily, as if beating. Each pulse reverberated not just through stone, but through their bones, their thoughts, their very sense of being. Amara's voice broke the silence, steady despite the tremor in her hands. This is it. The heart of the code. Julian's face was pale. His journal lay forgotten on the stone floor. He pressed his palms to his ears, though no sound came. It's speaking to us. We're inside it. This isn't archaeology anymore. This is... His voice cracked. This is reality. Nadia was trembling now, her flashlight long dead, her fingers glowing faintly from the glyph's radiance. It knows us, she whispered. It sees us. Colonel Mansour moved slowly, every step deliberate, boots heavy on the stone. We need to shut it down. Seal it before... He paused, his voice a bare thread. Before it consumes everything. But the glyph pulsed again. Not softly this time. It surged with a brightness that made their skin ache to look upon. The floor beneath them vibrated. It felt like standing on the edge of a great heartbeat, a heartbeat that was the pulse of existence itself. Every step forward was not movement, but a passage through layers of reality collapsing in on each other. Shapes swam before their eyes, cities folding like paper, oceans turning to crystal lattices, skies dripping into pools of light. Time itself seemed to crack. They reached the core of the chamber. The glyph was no longer a symbol. It was alive. It rose before them like an altar of pure energy. It pulsed with infinite rhythm. It sang without sound. Amara stepped forward. This is the choice. We can break the code, end the control, free reality, even if it destroys everything. Julian's voice trembled. If we do this, it's not just the pyramid that ends, it's everything. Time, memory, existence. Nadia swallowed, her breath trembling. We've already been changed. We can't go back. But maybe we can give the universe a choice. Rashid's face was stoic, but there was steel in his voice. Our duty is containment. If we fail, nothing remains. Not one thought, not one moment. Amara glanced at each of them. Then we choose. She stepped forward, placing her palm on the living glyph. Nadia followed, her hand trembling. Julian hesitated, staring deep into the shifting light. Rashid stepped forward quietly, joining them. The glyph's pulse grew violent, faster, harder, consuming. The hum filled their minds, now louder than thought itself. It became a chorus of voices, millions of them, speaking in a language beyond sound, a language that was felt. The overseer spoke again. This time it was not a word or thought. It was an entire presence, wrapping around them, pulling at their minds. You have chosen. You will witness the unraveling. The air trembled. The chamber seemed to stretch infinitely. The walls dissolved into streams of living light. The floor became a void beneath their feet. Reality began to fracture. Outside the pyramid, the world began to collapse. Cairo's skyline flickered, distorted, then split apart. Buildings twisted unnaturally, melting like wax under the heat of an impossible sun. People became outlines, their features distorting, disappearing in waves of light. Time cracked. Moments stacked over one another, past and future bleeding together. Inside, they clung to each other. Julian's voice was barely audible. It's everything. Everything we are, it's ending. Amara's voice was fierce. We have to finish this. The glyph pulsed faster, each beat a strike to their minds. They were no longer human bodies. They were threads of thought, memories, possibility. Visions overwhelmed them, and pharaohs kneeling under alien light, and cities swallowed into light and sound, and stars folding into themselves, the earth unraveling like a tapestry. Amara saw herself standing alone in the void, watching the code unfold into infinity. Julian saw an endless script, the language of creation, written in shapes that burned into his mind. Nadia felt regret and clarity, whispering, "We were never meant to know." Rashid's final thought was a vow, containment. The chamber became a crescendo of light and sound. The glyph flared brighter than 1,000 suns. The hum became unbearable. And then, silence. The desert above the pyramid no longer existed. Time no longer existed. Reality was gone. There was nothing but infinite darkness. And in that void, a whisper, soft, certain, eternal, a promise, that the code and the truth might awaken again.